21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Sustainability is just as much a corporate or commercial liability as it is a personal one. We tend to focus on the individual when storms happen, and we should absolutely do that, but we should also care about the commercial businesses down the road. Mom and pop grocery store that this once in a lifetime storm that's happening every year keeps knocking out the electricity. It's ruining their business and their livelihood because the fridge isn't running, or there's a hotel on the same beach that your homes are washed away from a tough storm. That hotel is unable to operate. Then you could get into the fact of the area. So if the area becomes dangerous prone, are people going to want to visit that area? Are they afraid to, go to that hotel if they know, oh, if I pick the wrong week, there may be a storm that rolls through. Either I get stuck there or I can't go there at all. So then you'll have people's tastes diverging and their habits diverging. It's something that's an unseen negative on a balance sheet, but we need to pay attention to it, so that commercial businesses also participate in saving the planet, not just the individual. It's not just what clothes you wear, it's how that clothes was made. And that's a company that's making that. It's not just how this, making the power, how that power is made, how is the power consumed, who is the largest consumer of power, who's, plastic waste, producing plastic waste and doing all those other things. It's up to everyone to do it, including businesses. It's not just the individual. Everybody's got to do it together. The awareness level is fairly high, but the steps to do it is still fairly low. They're very tepid. Yeah, extremely tepid. They're very afraid of new technologies because there have been boondoggles. I'm not a huge fan of the carbon credit market, and that was something that we're doing. And I understand there's some industries that are going to take a long time and they have to offset. Air travel is one of them. Airplanes last 30 years. Even today, if we're like, hey, we've got hydrogen and it's made cleanly and from water and electricity versus natural gas, like some of the hydrogen is made, those airliners are going to last another 30 years. So you've got 30 years before you flip the industry. How do you do that? So you may need carbon credits, but carbon credits shouldn't be for everyday things like, oh, I went to the store and I bought corn, so I should offset that corn with planting a tree. That's not how it works. You should go to how it's made and make that more efficiently, or choose better food sources. But there's also packaging. We don't control the packaging. It's controlled by corporations. You as the individual, doesn't matter if it's made by, plastic came from, oil, or does it better for plant-based plastics? Perhaps the plant-based plastics are better, but we don't get that choice as a consumer. But as the companies that are involved, they get that choice. They are the consumers in their industry for those products. So they don't make the packaging themselves. They, third party that out. So when, your favorite cookie comes in the plastic, perhaps it should have been, something else. Instead of using plastic wrap, maybe they could use beeswax for non-meat, things like beeswax paper. I use that at home. It's actually pretty good. It lasts a while and you can wash it. And then after a while, it does biodegrade, but it actually degrades. Holding your companies accountable just as much as you hold yourself accountable. What's going to happen for the second life of whatever you have? What's going to happen sometimes they're good buzzes. So like I take clothes made from plastic. That's a really good buzz around the outside. It looks really good from the outside. Like, hey, I just took a couple of bottles out of a recycling bin. But when you wash those clothes, the fibers of the plastic goes into the water and then kills fish. So when they're talking about microplastics, they're also talking about like plastic fibers that run off of clothes. So the ideas are nice, but sometimes you do have to see the long-term goals. But also doesn't mean that you stop. I will take, for example, um, lead, insulation. Asbestos is asbestos based insulation is really high value for keeping heat and cool in and keeping the elements out, but it's lead based and it's terrible for people. Does that mean that we stopped using insulation the second we find that out? Like, no, sometimes something seems good, and then you're like, that's not good, but the idea behind it was good, like energy efficiency. So then we moved on to other products, and we have soy-based foams, we have all these other things. I want companies to look at that to say, like, hey, this may not be the right fit for you, but there's going to be a right fit down the line. We have to break ourselves of thinking of one thing is going to rule them all for sustainability. It's not. We got ourselves into the mess because we thought, car, diesel fuels and gasoline and oil was going to get the one thing that was going to get us to like energy efficiency and like, the planet's going to be fantastic. It's not. We different tools for different jobs. You need very much contextualized, localized um, strategies because not everything is the same here. So like solar panels may work in, the southwest of the US, but it's not going to work in Alaska. There's not enough sunlight. So how do you bridge that gap? We use a different technology. But if we're in the mindset of, hey, only thing we can use is this one thing, which could be solar panels, it could be wind turbines, say, hey, we're just use this one thing, then we lead ourselves down this road where things don't work. And then we're like, hey, we tried, and we wipe our hands and we go back to the way things were before. And we can't do that as a planet. We can't do this as a society. We can't do it as business. Because if your people are getting injured or sick or destroying, those are your customers. You will have no customers left. Our vision is being sustainable and impactful hotel development and ownership group. Our mission is to be more profitable by being sustainable and impactful than not being sustainable and impactful. And once that model is done, everyone's just going to do it anyway. So that's the cheapest, most effective way is follow the money. If you make sure that there's money involved, the whole market will do it. They don't have to care about it. They don't have to love sustainability. But if it's something that makes the business money, all the businesses are going to do it. So that's why we, took a lot of time to look at our technologies, try to use off-the-shelf technologies as best possible to not raise the price of things. I will tell you from the technology development, particularly around mechanical things, do not use anything bespoke. That is the death of like anything. Even the piping will absolutely sink your budget and like sink your timeline down. So it's like, hey, do you need to drill this connector pipe, or do you just go down to your hardware store and find one that's already there? Find the one that's already there because you can get it up and running much quicker and a cheaper cost. So that was cost effective. Of course, you could worry about materials and sourcing and those kinds of things for impact, but getting that sustainable system up and running is your proof of concept. Getting that sustainable system up and running is actually doing something. It's cleaning the air. You're making energy cleaner, which makes the immediate surroundings a better place to live right from the jump. Then you can worry about the longer things and broaden that vision out further. It's impact. So we have to be good for the planet and the people. So sustainable for the people and the planet. If we're not, then the people aren't going to do it. I like to use the phrase additive sustainability, and that's a mythos for us. Don't take they don't take things away from people. Give them something in exchange. Give them something equal or greater, and then you won't have to battle. You don't have to legislate. People will do it anyway because it's already there. We did it with hairspray, where that chemical was destroying the ozone layer. In an instant, we flipped it and we actually like helped the ozone layer and it's healing up. So we can do it. We just don't say, hey, you're not going to get any hairspray. Like, no, get this hairspray that the thing that's bad is taken out, but we put something else that's of equal value into it. And I think that's what we need to. We've been beating people over the head with like a negative approach to selling sustainability. I'm here to make sure there's a positive selling, that you'll get everything you want. You don't have to worry about not washing your sheets as much. That kind of thing. Like, you're taking away from people. Add to it. Hey, you can we're going to wash the sheets. In fact, if you don't need to wash the sheets, something that hospitality could do is just steam them, put them in a steam machine. So you're using a fraction amount of the water, electricity, and weight, and creating wastewater, and you don't need to use chemicals. Just steam it. So if it's not particularly dirty, and it may just have a little weird odor, and the same person staying in that room, steam it every day instead of having to go wash it. But you're not taking down the level of sanitation there. So there's like, now it's where I see a lot of hotels are like, hey, we don't change the sheets unless you leave, or every 7 days. Um, that's a sanitation issue. We've just got out of a pandemic. We don't need to run back into another one, you know? So keep that level of sanitation high. And that's what we're all about. Like, give everybody what you need so we're able to live the lifestyle that we want to live in a positive fashion. Travel is important for people, not just from a money and monetary standpoint. It's also understanding standpoint. There's social implications to travel. You learn, you learn through people's cuisines and the way they live and the way they react. Like, I always take it as from a very American standpoint, going to other countries and they're eating dinner at like midnight, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so much different. But it's an experience that I was like, oh, this is cool. I like to learn a lot through food and the way people address food. So it also is a history, and it could also, marginalize a point where, you know, uh, a society may eat a lot of canned goods. They maybe perhaps at one point they went through a really tough war. That's something I see around like English food. English food is like, there's a lot of potted things and canned things because they went through World War II and they're being bombed, and it just became part of their culture. You can also see um, how refrigeration, or the lack of refrigeration, affected the way, people uh, do their food. So maybe they add curries or spices, or maybe they pickle things, or maybe they jarred them, or maybe they just eat really freshly and they don't eat anything that's not been caught or cut down that day. Um, and you can take that learning and just say, let's give it to them. Make sure that they're able to fly um, from this place to this place and do that visit and get that social learning and that impact of that travel. But let's do it sustainably and figure out how we can. We're here to figure it out. The main message I want to make sure is that we're here to figure it out and make sure that we don't take from you. When it comes to the money side of things, and creating more money by being impactful and sustainable, it's trying to create a close to a zero waste system and then acting on those points. So if there's something to be recovered, so we can go from an energy standpoint. So our technology, we've created a system using off-the-shelf parts. We'll get into deeper into those parts are, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But it's contextual based. What are you getting off of this property? How can you get as much energy out of this property? And what are your major cost factors? So I'll take a temperate place, but you do have winter. So I'm in New York City, so we'll take New York City. So my largest bill is not air conditioning, is not the lights, it's heat. Heat is like, it's 3 times as much per month in the winter times than anything that I'm paying for anything else. So how do we address that? So you'll look at this building, and I'm like, okay, should I sit here? So you follow the money. So the first thing you want to do is eliminate the heating bill. How do you do that? Okay, I look at this building and I say, okay, we could put solar panels on there. There's good solar radiation from coming in. Okay, you've got 100% of the roof covered in solar panels. You use effectively 25% of that electricity, 25 to 50% of that electricity on heating and hot water. Okay, maybe a little bit for cooking. Um, but you're losing, even with a heat pump, you're losing a bit of I would say in go ahead. Oh, sorry. Uh, so we you lose a bit of um energy in translating. So you're going from UV light to electricity, which is DC. Then you're changing it to DC to AC, which then runs heat pumps. Even the heat pumps are fantastic. There are things. We'll go more into technology. I'm just trying to show you the price structure. So you then you have to change that electricity into heat, and then that then becomes the stuff that you're doing. So you've got a couple of losses on the electricity that you used. How about if you look at there and you say, hey, you're capturing 100% of the solar radiation that's coming there, the UV radiation that's hitting that roof, but you're also wasting 100% of the infrared energy that's hitting the roof, that heat energy. Um, how about you lower the amount of solar panels and you capture that heat? And then you use that heat directly without that phase change, and you don't have to use electricity for that. Then you go further and you try to take whatever's left over because you could get about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't remember Celsius. It's a lot. You're very hot. So you can take that waste heat and turn it into more electricity by sending it through like a Stirling engine or environmental engine or a Stirling impact engine, um, and a free piston engine. And now you're creating more electricity, but now you've caught a waste thing. So then you can do the same for cooling. So you have a roof and then you have a basement. So the basement is 55 degrees below room temperature, say like 10 degrees Celsius, maybe 12. Um, and then you use that to pre-chill the part of your space when you need to do that. So now your heating and your cooling is gone from cost, and you're then again piping that cool energy to environmental engine to create a larger delta that produces more electricity as the heat and the cooling passes through it. So now you're recapturing waste. Put up a couple of LED light bulbs, you're using 1% of electricity at that point of your total capacity. The rest of it can be sold. Now you turned a system that doesn't particularly cost a lot of money because those are off the shelf technologies. That solar panel you're getting from, there. Um, then you're selling that. So that's how you create a little bit more money in what you're doing. So then you take that idea of zero waste system and you push it further into the hotel. You're going to take this hotel and you're going to say, hey, what's a capturable event? Okay, stop being the side attraction and start being the main attraction. So you add a art museum there to keep the people on property so they're spending money in and they're happy to spend money versus negative selling, which is you're staying at a hotel and they charge you random fees, which is the very negative experience. That then trickles down to the impact on your employees, where in the US, we have this is a year and a half is our typical service life for someone who's in the service industry for a hotel, a year and a half. You're constantly retraining people. So you're constantly spending more money retraining them. How about you give them a better experience by not having to fight with someone at the front counter who's upset because there's random things on their bill and they're coming at you and they're like having a moment. It happens. Why not break that chain? Get them to spend the more money in a ethical fashion that then makes your workers feel better because they don't have to argue with people. And I see it a lot at every single hotel. They're like, "Where's this fee? I don't know what this fee is." I stayed at hotels. I'm in hotels. I've stayed at hotels and I've looked at a bill and go, "Oh no, this is why are you charging me $45 a day for towels? I could bring my own." Like the towels are not that special. You're not reserving me a special seat. I have to go out there and fight for this resort to sit on the seat like everybody else does. So it's not like, oh yeah, this is a value to me. It's not. So you're creating. So then you again continue pushing that out. What areas are empty in that hotel? What areas are is it in the basement? How about you put down an algae growth system downstairs that you can create, turn into beer, you can turn into that. That's a capturable event. Now people are then buying products that are made right there. That algae that is then, grown on property is actually cleaning the air as it goes. So you're having something that is actually absorbing carbon. So if you say you want to, plant trees, 60% of the world's oxygen comes from the ocean, from algae. So you want to plant those trees, you're planting the trees right there. You can turn it into textiles. You can turn it into seat cushions. You can turn it into a whole bunch of things. And now you're absorbing carbon. You also have no transportation costs because it's happening locally. You can then spin that business off when you're finished building your hotel, and that becomes someone else's business. Now you have a business that's paying you money that did not exist, and it's 98% less water intensive than corn or cotton. That water is recapturable because it's a closed system. All you do is strain off the algae and you keep the water. You clean it up a little bit, put it through a couple of charcoal filters, send it back through the system. So you also don't need to use fresh water. You can use salt water. So it's you're not having to pull from a resource. So this hotel, maybe it's in Dubai. You don't have that much fresh water. You've got tons of salt water. Why don't you use that salt water, effectively? And you're also not creating brine by desalinization, which has been sucking out all the salt, and then the salt gets dumped into the ocean, but it's in such high concentration that it's toxic. Being sustainable and impactful, but also getting more money. I invented all this stuff. It's my patents. It's something that had been rattling around in my mind for a very long time. I spent about 15 years in hospitality on the design and art side. Then COVID happened, and that kind of was like the trigger that I needed to bring everything together. I had these ideas, and then I went into, I had a colleague who was in the green industry, and I went there for about a year and a half. And it was in the carbon credit industry. And I saw how the really effective carbon credits were the ones no one were buying, and the highly ineffective ones are the ones that everyone was buying because they were cheap. So the dollar to plant a tree, there's no aftercare on that tree. How do you know it's going to grow to full size? Because they sell it to you saying like, oh, it's going to remove this amount for this many years. You don't know if it's going to grow that large. And they count it as fully grown from the second it's planted. It's a sapling. It's not pulling as much carbon as a fully grown tree. So I said, hey, if I want to go back into hospitality, but I want to make a difference. I see hospitality is highly wasteful, is highly impactful on people's lives. Many locations, hospitality is the number one employer and the number one industry, particularly around island nations and warm places. Hospitality is it. And I've been to resorts where I've been to certain places and the resort will have power and the Shanty Shack Village doesn't have anything. Why is this business allowed to like absorb so much and then give so much little back to the place that it's absorbing? You're selling the locale, particularly like resorts are selling locale. It's the beach, it's the blue oceans, and you're absorbing so much from this community of the people that live there and also work there that then are still in poverty. Um, how do you change that dynamic? You have to be able to change that dynamic through making things more profitable, and that's how we're going to do it. So we've invented the key energy system. It provides heating, cooling, and electricity to the key energies of a space. That's where the name comes from. And we designed it so that the hotel uses very little electricity and very little of its own resources so it can provide that to the community. Yes, to be very capitalistic, you're now selling to your own selling to the local community, but you're doing it in a positive way. You're giving them something that they may not have had before, and you're giving it to in a beneficial way. You're not here to burn, fossil fuels that create, asthma cases. You're there to provide electricity. So that's a revenue source that makes us more profitable than we were before. And we're also not dependent on average rate per room per night. We call it ADR. How much? So what if there's like trends happen, particularly in hospitality? When so like I noticed in Italy, like I have friends that all go to Italy. It used to be you would only go to southern Italy. Now everyone's going to northern Italy. Every 10 years, the trends change and certain places become hotter and not as hot. How do you gap that 10 years? It's going to roll back around in 10 years. But how do you bridge that gap? How do you bridge your off seasons? Do you fire all your employees and lay them off and they don't have any income? How do you if there's a war, how do you like there's so many external factors that you can't handle, but the best thing you could do, hedge your bets, is off property spend. That's why they have credit cards that are labeled with Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott. because they're getting transaction fees even if you're not on property. That's why airlines do it. They want that money that's off, but just in case that core business shakes a little. And you could we've created that with our algae growth system. We also have an algae growth system. I jumped ahead. Our key energy system. The algae growth system is a flexible, modular, automated algae growth system. So we can provide ourselves with food, um, alcohol. I made algae beer, and I apologize to the audience. If algae beer becomes a thing like kombucha, no one really asked for it. It just happened. And I will personally apologize. I've made like algae hot sauce, like I've made some fun things um, that you can make right there locally. You don't have to ship it in. You're creating an industry that wasn't there. And hey, if you bottle too much, you can sell it to the industry. You can They also make really good like face mask and like beauty products and shampoos and conditioners. So you have everything you need for that hotel effectively, besides maybe some animal products right there. And you don't have to worry about shipping in. You don't have to worry about customs. As a business, you don't have to worry about customs. You don't have to worry about shipping delays. You don't have to worry about, in fact, you don't even have to worry about like natural causes. So sometimes the crop doesn't come in. Every so often, you're like, if you're into wine, it was a dry year, so the wine tastes weird or different, or it was a really, really wet year, the wine is not edible. Like you just don't want to drink it. So you can control a lot of factors, and that is a sellable moment in that you can maximize your income on that. So that's how we create 400% more on spit property spend per person than we would if we were just a hotel and a restaurant. Like, how do you move beyond that? Then it's also the free PR that you get for doing all these things. So you sit on the podcast and you sit on the things talking about this stuff because you're pulling all that stuff in. The word of mouth does get around. Then you can also use the algae growth system as a carbon sequestering system. So if you want to do actual carbon credits that you can actually say, I put 12 tons of carbon, you can. So you just drain off the algae and you bury it somewhere. And you're actually locking it away permanently. You're not, so with trees, if the tree dies, the carbon goes back into the system. So you've got 30 years before it's back around in the system, but there's natural disasters. It could be a forest fire. There could be, some sort of disease that kills the tree. It could be a bug infestation. Like we have those lantern bugs here in New York in the fall, and they're very pretty, but they're really not good for our trees. Um, and I don't know who brought them here or how they got here, but they're super invasive and nothing else eats them and they're destroying trees. So if you paid all this money and you did the carbon credits for the trees, those trees may not be around, but you have a controllable system that you can physically count. You can weigh how much you take out of the system. You can also dry the algae so it weighs less, so you can put the water back into the system. In a carbon sequestering kind of thing. If you're in a place that um needs to burn something, like if you're in a locale that is, you can turn that into biofuel. So now you're on property creating biofuel that then can power the equipment for the hotel, that can power the van that come gets you from the airport, the airport transportation. You can sell to the community. So if the electricity grid isn't there, you have other options, and you try to be as carbon neutral as possible. Um, but that also is a money capture event. So how you can move from, you know, making 20% to 30% margin, you can make that very easily. It's just slight changes that you have to do in our thinking and how we approach things in a holistic manner. Systems matter just as much as point efficiency. I really believe in helping people, and it's something part of the ethos of who I am. It's, you help yourself first, and then you turn around and help other people. Like once the cup is running over, you can't pour out of the cup if the cup is empty. So stabilize yourself, and then you help others. I've was president of NEWH New York, which is a nonprofit that gives scholarships to hospitality students. And this part of the conversation could be very U.S. focused. The amount of money we spend on like higher education here is mind blowing. I many years ago, even when I was in school, it was $11,000 a semester. I had to work three jobs to get through school, and I was absolutely destroyed at the end of it. And if it wasn't for the high cost of education, I probably would have been a doctor. But I could not label my family. My father's a police officer, and my mother works at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Like I could not burden them with $500,000 more worth of, $500,000 worth of schooling. And I'm not even a doctor at that point. Like I would just be graduating and they would have 500 grand like of money to pay off. They didn't have that kind of money. It's disheartening. So I'm really here about the education part. So I wouldn't wish my lifestyle through school on any of my worst enemy. Like you should be able to focus, you should be able to like learn well, and you should be able to go into the field you want to without some social barrier or financial barrier that we've created. So we give away the largest amount last year of any WH New York history. We give out the largest amount, which is $21,000 per student. For a particular student, we're doing $12,000 per student. Before we were doing $1,000 to $2,000 per student. So we have I really focused that nonprofit on there. I've been on the board for quite a while. I'm past president. So I'm the fun grandpa who gets to bake cookies and stuff, and I'm not the person in front anymore, and I'm happy about that. But I loved it. But I'm also like, whoo, that was a lot. Um, the social impact, I really think business can do good things, can make money without destroying people, without being a jerk. You don't have to be a jerk to be a good person. Everyone holds up like Steve Jobs and like Elon Musk. You don't need to treat your people like trash to get good things out of them. That is the most soul destroying way. You don't punch down, you punch up. Punching down makes someone's life a worse place. Punching up makes the world a better place. You should hold your leaders accountable and saying, hey, why isn't this happening? Why isn't that doing? But you don't need to destroy people. You don't need to destroy the planet to, go forward. In the US, uh, the average income for a service worker in hospitality is $29,000. The federal level for poverty is $33,000. So that means the average person working hospitality is is legally poor. They are in poverty. So how can we fix that? Tips don't do it, and I don't like the tip system. We really kind of need to break that. Perhaps breaking. So my model will bring in more money, bring in effectively 400% more, and we'll divide some of the extra money up to give them that 20 or 30% increase and to bring them above the poverty level and make them move higher than that. Give them opportunities to invent. So our first property will have effectively a STEM lab. We're very engineering focused, so that we're going to need it anyway because we want to build our own things. But inviting the community to come in and say, "Hey, you have an invention. We're happy to help test it. We're happy to give you some educational tools on this." Inviting universities, and not just universities, going all the way down to elementary school and primary school, and having bring those kids in and get them interested and tell them like this is the process. Making sure that we're inclusive of everyone, because sometimes seeing someone that looks like you do that work says like, hey, I could do this too. So having the female or the people of color or everybody involved. um when I say equity, it also is like inclusion is not just um race, religion, those things. It's also languages you speak, because that shapes the way you deal with problems. English, it's a trade language, it's very butchered, but you can get things across really quickly. And that's good for trade, but the nuance thing you can't. Like Greek, there's multiple ways of saying love in Greek, and they all mean a different kind of relationship. We have to have a whole entire sentence in English saying I love you, but as a friend, not as anything else, or I love my son as or your father, your mother. Those are different kinds of love, but we don't have that granularity, that perspective in different life experiences, including culture and language, really brings in a different way of solving problems. When we're looking for properties, what we do is we do the environmental impact study, but we also ask the locals, say like, hey, what goes on that property over there? And they'll tell you, like I was looking at a property in Costa Rica. They're like, yeah, that river floods like every 2 days. And I was like, oh, no, no, no. I don't want a property that floods. But I could have spent a year and a half and oh God, how many tens of thousands of dollars on the environmental impact study but it took 10 minutes just to ask the local, like, hey, does this happen? And I did stay around and it did flood. So I visited about 4 months later and the property was like, oh, a swamp. But the person who was trying to sell it to me did not tell me that. So this social impact, social, good you can do also has returns on you. So that saved me, 50 grand. Saved the company a bunch of money and time. Time is also, a thing, and we're not, going down a road we don't need to go down. It's a way of interweaving. So again, sustainability and impact are the same thing, because if people can't strive for the best if they can't breathe, if they're sick, if their houses are being washed away. That's the base. That's sustainability. Impact is, okay, these people are here. How do we bring them in? How do we make them feel good, make them a part of the process, because they are the next geniuses. How many cures for cancer may have been already made if this child wasn't working in a sweatshop their whole life, and that's what they're constricted to because they can't get out. And that impact isn't that hard, particularly in a hotel. Our contracts are large. We give away multi-million-dollar contracts. So I was having an issue with fabrics, and I've said the story a couple of times. I wanted a sustainable fabric. I found the seat covering, and it looked like pretty good. And I just happened to ask, who made this? And then I found out it was like slave children, like children in sweatshops. No, that's not sustainable. That's not cool. That's like, no. So by me pulling that $4 million contract is definitely going to send a message like, this is not appropriate. We have a lot of power as business owners, as entrepreneurs, that we can shift it by just saying no to something. We don't have to come up with a solution, but we can say we want the solution. Someone's going to fill that solution because they want the money. We are the solution to the problems, and I want to make sure that we're able to connect. Follow us on our website, which is www.yogh.group. Follow us on LinkedIn. Follow us on Instagram. We're all over the place. We are the only YOGH group that's out. If you have sustainable products, please send them our way. I would love to evaluate them. If you have invention ideas, we can collaborate and see what we can do there. Sustainability and impact are not some mountain we can't cross. It is just a flat little bump in the road, and we're going to do it together.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
Imagine a space where triumphs, trials, and tales of entrepreneurship come alive. Welcome to the 21st Century Entrepreneurship Podcast, a gold awarded journey hosted by Martin Piskarik, connecting with listeners in 95 countries and ranking in the top 0.5% of all podcasts. Join our exclusive community, elevate your perspective, and embark on the path to success.